Sorry.
All right, good evening, everyone. Time is now 6:02. We're going to go ahead and get started. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Sure. Trustee Sanchez.
Here.
Trustee Reyes-Plummer.
Here.
Trustee Jones.
Here.
Trustee Lightfoot. Trustee Lightfoot.
He's not
Trustee
coming.
Peppers.
Here.
Trustee Peppers.
Here.
Trustee Brandon
Here.
and Mayor Booker.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right.
Two.
Manager Wills Armstrong, can you open us in prayer, please?
Yes, Mayor. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you with humble hearts, and we ask that you would forgive us for our sins. We ask that you would forgive us for any transgressions against you and one another. I ask, Lord, that you will lift up this community, that you will keep us safe, that you will decrease COVID cases, that you will help this board to lead in a united, cohesive way that looks out for the best interests of this community. I pray for our staff, who without them, nothing gets done, that you will strengthen us, keep us all healthy and safe, and continue to keep us aligned as one community focused on one vision to move Maywood forward. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we have 4 no approval of minutes in regards to our oaths, announcements, and proclamations. Just giving everybody an update. We are now no longer in the negative when it comes to our positivity rate. When for COVID-19 earlier this year, at the beginning of January, we started off at about 378% of a 14-day rotating COVID positivity rate. So now we are negative 42%, which means we've done over a 400% turnaround, which is really great. And that's thankful to staff for being able to be functional and operate with limited services with the village. Thank everybody for staying home, staying safe, providing and staying in those limited services when we're offering our virtual meetings. So with that being said, just looking overall in Cook County, when you look at the previous map of how red it was at the beginning of January, aside from the little piece of south suburbs, there is no more red as far as the 14-day rotating positivity rate. So right now in the village of Maywood, when you look at the COVID cases, it's less than 1% of our population. And we definitely, at the beginning of January, we're more so about 700 cases a week. So we're down to a little bit under 200. And there have not been any deaths within the last 10 days. So that's great news as well. So I just want to give everybody an update in regards to that. All right, so we'll go to 7, Finance Management Report, A, Fiscal Year 2022 Budget Amendments.
Good evening, everyone. I did not long ago send out, and I want to be clear, a rough draft. I did have an opportunity to meet with the Finance Committee. And I'm old school, so I'm sorry that I don't say the correct name, but the Finance Committee, and we went over a lot of the amendments and where the departments are within their budget, just trying to make sure I had all of the updated information. Today, there was some older invoices that hadn't got entered to the tune of about $585,000. So I needed to go back and integrate those numbers. So that this is kind of like a work in process just to make progress, just to make sure we have the latest numbers. So when you do make a decision, you're making a decision based on the most current numbers. So with that said, what I did was I don't have my cover, memo breaking everything down because this is still, we're still working on it. So once we're able to go through this, answer any questions that you may have, then, we'll, I'll write it up. But now I can speak to everything. So if we start with our revenue, and that's right after the summarized cover that I sent you guys. What I did was just went through all of our revenues to see which ones we think may hit the target, which ones may go over, and which ones will not hit the target. And just as a reference, that's the whole reason that we do an amendment, right? Just to get a feel for where we are today, because we know that the budget is just a plan, it's our goal. But now, based on 8 months is where I stopped. Through December, this is where we're landing, and then the needed adjustments is what I have before you. So starting with our revenues, one of the first things, and this was a last minute add, so I see I have the account number, but not the title. This is our administrative hearing. So this is the things that come from the code enforcement department. So there's our administrative hearings, and then police's compliance tickets. So if you see the two of those, you'll, kind of understand what those adjudications are for. So the first one for the administrative hearings, the original budget was $25,000, and currently they've brought in about $26,719. So just to be kind of conservative, the recommended amendment here is $5,000 to increase that projected revenue from 25,000 to 30,000. Okay. And then the next one is the ambulance rescue fees, which were initially budgeted at 525,000, based on us being at 611,000 based on December 31st. The amendment that is recommended is for 100,000 to increase that budget to 625,000. So that's pretty much the same process for these revenues that you see on this report. So I don't need to, go through each one of them, but that is the same concept for each. So, but if we did just look at boot charges, and we'll see that here, this is a decrease. So anytime you see the parentheses, that's a negative. So we're taking away 5,000 because we're 8 periods in, and the police department has just begun to restart their boot program. So we'll likely receive some revenue, but it won't be the initial $10,000 that we projected during budgeting. So that negative means that we're taking away 5,000, and now that revised budget would be $5,000. Building permits are doing, extremely well. So we're recommending to increase that budget by 400,000, which will then give us a revised budget of 750, and so forth and so on throughout each of these that you see, for a combined $935,000 increase in what we budgeted. And that's the total with the additions and the subtractions. And the revenue amendment is just as necessary as the expense, because we have to find the extra revenue to still have a balanced amendment. So just going through these, and this is the summarized. Behind this, I have the details so you can see the whole report through December. So if you had any questions or any of them that you thought that, well, maybe we can raise, that revenue some more, or maybe we should be more conservative and, decrease some of those revenues. So that's in the detail, and we'll get to that.
Director Satchel.
Yes.
Before we go away from this page,
Mhm.
can you give some light on why we are changing from $100,000 change in the Illinois Debt Recovery Program?
Yes. So they have pretty much suspended that program through COVID. So last year they scaled back, and what you had to do was sign a document saying, yes, although you're given the option, we want you to still collect on our behalf. So that was what the thing was for last year. So if you didn't sign that document and say you wanted to still participate, then they wouldn't. So this year, they've just decided overall, not to collect from folks due to COVID. Some people may be out of work. So they're just not gonna, take your income tax and your winnings. We still have some trickling in that because what they do, they hold it for 60 to 90 days before they forward it to us. So there's still some that was already in loop. So we're still getting a little of those old revenues, but yeah, as a whole, they're suspending, I'll say, that program until further notice.
Okay. And then the ambulance and rescue, the increase that was adjusted, is that based on us increasing what those fees are going to be for the future, or is that just increase in traffic?
That's just an increase based on where we are to date. So I didn't consider that. I know we just passed that at our last board meeting. I'm not sure how soon it would take effect, when we will start realizing, that difference. But that is for sure, another area that we could potentially, look to increase before this is all, said and done. I do want to note the Maywood Proviso officer. We had an officer, I think, at Pace. And to my knowledge, that hasn't happened because we would usually send in, an invoice for them to pay us. And I don't believe we have one since right around that COVID year. We haven't had an officer in the school. So I took that.
All right, so then just one last one.
Yes.
Are we going to go over the miscellaneous more of the 100,000 down to be revised it down to 45,000? What it is? Is that
I increased it by 45,000. So it was 100,
yeah, gotcha.
now it's 145. Yeah. And these are just, payments that come in that don't fall under any of the categories, that we have a line item for. So it's a variety of, different things that come in throughout the fiscal year.
All I got. Does any trustee have any questions in regards to the revenue before we keep going?
Miss Satchel.
Yes.
And maybe this question might be for the village manager as well. Do we have any anticipation related to pro champs through the fiscal year on what we may or may not be anticipating in terms of that program?
Hi, Trustee Jones. At this time, we do not have a projected revenue amount. I don't think the attorney is on the call, but we are still working with them on some things for the agreement. So at this time, we can't accurately project, but we know it'll be an increase from what we've had in the past, which is.
And this is vacant building registration, right?
Right.
So currently, and it's not here in this list because I didn't amend it, but just for your knowledge, we budgeted $50,000, and currently, at least through the end of December, when I say currently, that's what I mean. We're at about $34,000, dollars. So we think we'll meet that target, but in years past, we did have a larger revenue in that line.
Okay. Any other trustees? All right.
And my apologies again, you're gonna have to, move your paper around. When I scanned it, the document just kind of shifted. So now we're going into the expenses, and this is pretty much for each of the departments had, some amendments. The first one is the clerk's office, and the first item is just sick buyback. That's just cleaning up actual to budget. So we budgeted $1,500 in sick buyback, and they actually used $2,229.28. So my amendment is just to revise the budget to reflect what was actually used. And this one is it's hard to predict because you don't know, who's going to use sick time, and then how much will be left to buy back at the end of the year. So typically when we're budgeting, we'll try to take an average, kind of look at some historical data, but health is something that you can't predict. And I think we were conservative on that because, our friend COVID is still lurking. But the biggest thing in the clerk's office is codification. So the amendment here is for $14,500 to bring their original budget of $5,500 to $20,000. And that's the result of updating our ordinances. We amended and changed some of our committees, and those things required ordinances and for them to be codified online, and we do have hard copies. So as of December, we were at close to 12,000, but even when I look at January, some of the expenses that we have in January, it's at about 14,000. That's not even represented here. So we're comfortable hoping that $20,000 is a good number, as long as we don't foresee any other major changes to our ordinances throughout this fiscal year. And then, of course, we have a new clerk who offered her staff, a little bit more training than maybe years past. So we just amended that by 500. So there wasn't a big increase. And for a total amendment for that department is $15,730. So it's not too substantial, considering, it wasn't really her department that drove this. Any questions there?
No, I think this page is pretty clear.
Okay. So then the manager's office, all of those amendments actually decrease her budget by $41,000. The most notable is the health insurance, because currently she's the only one in the department, that needs only one in the department. So that health insurance was decreased. The newsletter, we actually took 10,000 from here and put it in the board's budget, the trustees budget for a miscellaneous, so you guys can have a little bit ability to spend on some things. As you see, we were able to increase our revenue, and one of the reasons that we had taken so many things out of you guys' budget is because we didn't think we had revenue to substantiate it. So that's a good save, 41,000 there. And finance, the net amendment is 12. The biggest thing here is just the personal property tax for the library. And sometimes we net it against the revenue. So you don't even, really see what it is. But here we just listed it out versus charging that expense to the revenue. So, so that's the biggest thing here. The other thing that you'll see here in finance and other departments is that we're removing the telephone line item from each of the departments, and we're putting them in central services. And that's because it gives a false impression that the finance department, police, and fire are utilizing, like, for instance, in this case, $37,000 in phones, and that's not the case. So we're putting them all in central service, and then we're going to do an audit of the phones because we just don't feel like the costs represent our usage. So we're going to put them all in one line, do an audit, and see exactly where our telephone usage is. And so that'll be something that we bring forth at a later date in terms of the findings from the audit. Bank fees, we're working with the bank. We missed a couple of meetings, people got sick and, so we need to reschedule that. But we have noted like a drastic increase in our bank fees. And we just need to, well, we know why, but we need the bank to look at that and, and let us know if this is something that's going to move forward. I don't know for sure if it's from when MB switched over to Fifth Third, but this is related to our balances, or it could just be that we, we have a little bit more money. And before we didn't have much money in our account, so there wasn't a lot of fees associated with it. So this is associated with our daily balance that we're carrying. Questions for finance?
Nope.
Okay.
Miss Satchel, did I miss the one about the library personal property tax?
Yes. So what I said there is that typically we'll just net it against the revenue. So, that's a state shared revenue. We get it monthly, and then a portion of that goes to the library. And it just depends on how we recognize it. So if we charge that expense to the revenue, then it'll just offset it and you'll see a decrease in the revenue. But here we're going ahead and charging it as the expense that it is, and it's not being netted against the revenue. So that's why it's shown here. And we didn't budget for it because the prior, I think, couple of years, we just netted against the revenue. And there isn't really a right or wrong way to do it. But the best way is to show it as an expense because that's what it is.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Why is the library attached to us? And it being its own entity like the park is, how do we annex that, or should we try to annex?
So this is I actually tried to get the information in the original contract or agreement from the clerk's office. They weren't able to find it. I tried to contact the library at the time they were closed. I don't want to misspeak on the relationship, but we were all one. We were all under one tax agency.
All three.
So they were able to get their own taxation, but I think some of the things based on the size, they couldn't get everything. So like for a long time, they were on our health insurance because they're so small that they couldn't get their own health insurance, as was the, housing, Maywood housing. So there's just a lot of arrangements or agreements that predate any of us, but are enforceable.
Stop Express one or the
Okay.
So yeah, I'll try to find that paperwork that spells it out. But so far I haven't been successful. But it's a percentage that they get.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
I was just curious. I've been wanting to ask that question for a while.
Yeah, and I knew like probably 15 years ago. But
Yeah.
I just don't remember. So that's why I wanted to actually find the language. So we'll all, I won't miscommunicate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mhm. Okay. So the law department, I think I'm gonna go back and need to adjust some more onto this, but because again, we're trying to consolidate and not have things all throughout different departments, different lines, right? So there was some advertising in HR for different things. There was some filing fees that some other folks might have used as contractual professional. So we're just trying to streamline and have everything in one area. So we started doing that with our advertising and our filing fees. And so I just increased those budgets to reflect that. As with telephone, you'll see in the other departments where those budgets were decreased and they were put in one line to reflect that. So this mostly affects the clerk's office, because right now they're doing doing the advertising for the village, but it wouldn't be their expense because they're not doing it for their department, they're doing it for every department. So we're just putting it, because it's a legal requirement that we do so, we're just putting it under law, and we wouldn't charge that to the clerk's office, because it isn't, her expense. Years ago, each department was just on their own to do their own filing in the paper. So now we've streamlined that, and one department does it. So we're gonna recognize those under the law department. And the law department is our department. It is in KTJ department, right? So anything that we decide to go, all of this doesn't represent KTJ. It represents the village's expenses. Okay, so the amendment here is just to increase that overall budget by $10,000. And those are just the two lines that are impacted. If we go to our MIS system, telephones, you'll see is coming out, subscriptions. This is mostly our email. Our GoDaddy is quite expensive. So we're increasing that. The budget was 15.7. We've used 14.7, and I've made charges that haven't hit this line yet in January for another $7,700. So we needed to increase there. Office supplies and computers. So that rounded out that department at 15,900. Am I moving too fast?
No.
Okay. Okay, so
Move a
again.
little faster.
Okay, oh, well, cool. Hey,
Look, my thing is we see the information. If we have the questions, we can point out some like quick highlights of things that we see have changed, but.
Okay, not a problem.
We got 41 pages.
Okay, not a problem. So central services, this is what I just spoke of, right? So what I did was reduce the telephones from all the other departments and put them here. So that's why that amendment is requesting 175,000, but you'll see that it was decreased in the other departments. So you guys, right? Presidents and trustees. The biggest thing here, your support person doesn't require insurance. So the salary, so health went down by 30. I did increase you guys training and seminars, which you may or may not use throughout the year, but this is what it was last year. So I just put it back at the 30. As I mentioned, the manager donated $10,000 from her budget to you guys for miscellaneous. Community engagement, I have a BOT sponsorship. I forgot to change that. We're calling that a community engagement. And that's the most significant. Of course, we already know the mayor was able to lease a new vehicle, but the entire expense is listed here. So essentially, there's an $83,000 increase to the mayor and board of trustees line item. Questions there? Yes.
Just to go back to the vehicle thing, you said lease a new vehicle, or did we purchase?
Purchase.
Well, yeah. We have it as lease payment. Sorry, it should be finance payments where it's being financed.
And we didn't pay for, and we didn't pay for the whole thing up front, right? Even though
but we're recognizing the entire expense because that's how much it costs. But we'll make some adjustments. Some adjustments will be made with that at the end of the fiscal year, because it'll appear like there's a duplication from the expense and then the monthly payments that we're making. But this is just to recognize that expense, and it'll be adjusted at the end of the fiscal year. Moving on to code enforcement.
Before you move on, I just want to note for the clerk that I have to leave because I have another meeting that I have to attend. So just for the record, I have to step out.
What time do you have to leave? Should I even go faster?
No,
but you heard this already because we did this at the finance committee meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you. You guys have a good night.
You too. Code enforcement actually has a net, which reflects a negative, a reduction to their budgets. And that was saved in position that they didn't hire. So that's the biggest reduction in that straight time. And it pretty much funded the remaining requests to increase in that department. Police has a net increase of $361,000. And of course, we know that 300,000 is for the radios that were just approved, and 25,000 is for the Homeland Security that we approved. And it was put here, and an increase in overtime by 100,000. So all of those reflect the $361,000 increase to their budgets. Fire had all their amendments resulted in a decrease in their budget. The biggest thing, they did request $75,000 in overtime, but there was a decrease in health insurance. So that helped there. There was an increase to capital outlay, but that was also an increase in the revenue because they received a grant for the equipment. That was an additional $148,000. Public Works, it still needs work, but right now they've increased their budget by $243,000, but there's still invoices that are coming in for that department. So before it's brought before you to vote, that'll be cleaned up and you'll have the correct amendment, because I do think it will be more.
Quick question.
Yes.
Why doesn't Public Works have anything for overtime? And why is the fire department needing $75,000 more for overtime?
Because Public Works, they've been utilizing comp time. So their salary line slightly increased their regular salaries because they've been using comp time versus overtime. So that's part of that reason. The fire department, much like police, let's not forget they asked for 100. They have folks that are out. So when they have to hire back, then it increases. They have workers' comp, and they had some sick extended too.
Okay.
Also, if I can jump in, the fire department is down on their roster, one employee as well.
This is the one that left in like September.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, lands and building, nothing major here, but there was an increase of 17,000. Community development is down by 46,000 to their budget, just a few tweaks.
Question for community development. There was money in their budget for the golf range, right? Was that taken out?
It's in the TIF. It's in Madison TIF.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
I may have to come back on code enforcement. When you said that, it made me remember that they may hire for another position. So I just got to make sure that there's enough, even with a reduction, that it's saving. And the reason that this was able to be reduced so much, because you remember the two departments were together. And so, we had the director's salary here as well. And so, but now that director is in code. So that's why that reduction is there. But I will go back and make sure there's enough for an additional person that they were looking to hire. Other than that, the last item in general fund is HR. And that was only an increase of like 39, almost $4,000. So that wasn't significant. If you look right below, right now I'm projecting for our amendment of an increase in revenues of 935,000 and an increase in expenses of 756. So there looks like there's net revenue of 179, but again, this is a rough draft. So, because it's going to balance and we're not going to have, any money left on the table, especially when we get through public works. Wink, wink. Okay, let's see. So skipping all of the other departments. So was there a question? Or
No,
was that just John smirking out loud?
oh no, that was me laughing. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
did you? Okay. So we didn't need to do anything to motor fuel, to recreation, to CDBG, to the bonds. We do have something with bonds, but I need to look at that. So we're moving on along to the water department, to the water fund. And mind you, my pages are scrambled too. Okay, so if we look at the revenue here for the water fund, the only thing that I put here, that's in the wrong one.
If we're looking
that
at reading
garbage
at page
revenue.
12, is the page 12 out of 41?
You know what, that I didn't number the summary. I'm on the summary, but
Where
you,
it says water collections, first one is a 4155
yeah,
for
the
interest.
revenue, that should have been the expense. I think I put it in both places because what I looked at, I realized that we had that garbage increase and budget didn't correctly reflect that. So that would have been on my pages are not, where is it?
It says that you increased it by 180,000.
180,000. Yeah, I had
Yeah.
it in revenue and expense. It should only be an expense.
Gotcha.
Yep. So that's by 180,000. And that's the most notable. We're able to decrease our insurance. And this is water collections. This is my department, my water department, the young ladies, and the expenses that go there.
So
Pump
what?
station. Mhm.
I was gonna say you took away the 200,000 on the write-off and adjustments.
Right. So that is actually for adjustments to the residents' accounts. So that always shows a decrease in the revenue because we're taking off what we bill them. So that's correct in the revenue side because we're removing $200,000 of potential revenue.
Okay.
Okay. So then the pump station, we increased equipment rental, which wasn't budgeted before. But I was just informed that there's a generator that they have that's about $7 grand. So I just, increased it to 10. I reduced their telephone and training and seminars because there was no mention of training for the pump station. He does need to take a test, but the training had already been provided. So just to reduce that to kind of help offset that increase. In water sewer maintenance, we decreased the capital outlay over 5,000 of 166. And this was basically the payment for the railroad. When we did the budget, we hadn't made that last payment. And so when I look back, we made the payment like right in April, but we had already passed the budget. So we were able to reduce it by that, 166,308.34, which is the exact amount of that last payment. It was 2 payments we had to make, for the adding that third line to the metro line. So we reduced it by that 166, which helped offset, some of the increases. And again, all of Public Works will need a second look. And then we go to 4155, which is again my department. And the only real expense here was the garbage for the 180. You see the reduction in the debt service. That's just because it was moved from there to a different line. We were able to reduce the health insurance. There was a couple of unfilled positions here as well. So for the water fund, you see that they're showing an increase in revenue by 370,000 and a decrease in expenses. So that formula is wrong because that should have been what, 3 364 and some change, not 375. And that is it. That is it for that. The only other thing that I didn't go over is that ARPA. And although we're not gonna spend it, because I took that 1.574 out of the corporate fund because we didn't want that to reflect as revenue for the corporate fund, because the guidance is to create its own fund and its own budget. So you'll see the revenue is reflected. And then there are 7 categories in which we can utilize that revenue. And so that's where I kind of left it to have some input, from each of you or all of you collectively, or any ideas on how you would like to break that down.
Say which part is the breakdown again?
So you see it's all blank. So we have public health, the negative economic impact, the services to impact this, I just, paraphrase it. Services to impacted communities, premium pay for our first responders. Well, not necessarily, just premium pay for employees, infrastructure, revenue replacement, and administrative. It probably would have been helpful if you had the documents, because under each category, it gives you criteria. So like, for example, I'm going to be quick. Under public health, there's 12 different ways that you can use that. So you have to be intentional when you use it, and make sure that it that is one of the areas that are permissible. So for public health, for example, would be COVID testing, contract tracing. If we did premium pay, public sector employees, so it's not first responders. So if there was any incentives that you wanted to provide the employees, grants to, other employees in a private sector, if you wanted to partner, administrative. So, portions of some of the staff could be charged here for working on, that grant. That could be like myself, maybe the accountant, the village manager, then infrastructure. That's like our broadband and, drinking water. So, there's, specific things that you have to use the money for under each of those headings.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think in looking at when we did the breakdown where it could showcase all of the different opportunities for the federal grants and the funding that we get from ARPA, probably a lot of that funding will be utilized during that time from the administrative standpoint. And then I know we're going to be having conversations. I just am very happy to see, again, we have 4 different budget times to spend this money. It's not like it has to burn a hole in our pocket. And I just want us to be as responsible as we possibly can. A lot of programs are still out for people right now with COVID and building back, but probably in the next 2 years or next year and a half, when those things dry up, that's when the country and the small communities are really going to start to feel it. And I just want to make sure we're doing the best that we can to keep this as a cushion as we are diligent about applying for the funding that's out right now, because when it's up, we don't feel it.
Yeah, and to your point, one of the things that was addressed in a couple of calls I was on with other, stakeholders in a county is not to duplicate, right? So like, and forgive me, I can't even think, what is it? Leap, whatever. I cannot think of the name right now. That I just, so I did apply and provided our information so our residents can participate in their program, and it provides up to $1,500 for your water. So that's not something we would want to offer right now, because then it would be a duplication of services. So they were very, adamant about, making sure communication is, flowing, because the intention here is not for, a person to go around and, get $1,500, then wind up having a credit balance and want a refund, it happens, at least it there's an attempt on at some point. But so yeah, at this point, I know that we haven't, specified, and what really will happen in our next budget is that these funds will be budgeted as an appropriation of fund balance, right? What we didn't spend this year will just, be put in that line item, because you can't count the same revenue twice. But it will be an appropriation of this fund balance, and that's how we would, we'll actually budget for it when we're really going to utilize it.
Perfect. So
The manager has her hand up.
Manager Wells Armstrong. I can't see.
Thank you, Mayor. We had discussed in the committee with Chairman Jones and Trustee Brandon that ARPA funding allows for certain expenditures like POCO. We have the board approved an agreement for them to start doing the community outreach component that we're required to do to receive the ARPA funding. We did not talk about this, but it just came to my mind. If we have the surplus funds in fiscal year 22's budget, we could pay that I think it's about $13,000 out of the general fund to just reserve the ARPA money if that's what the board wished to do. So I just wanted to put that out there. I had told the committee that, that was a line item that I had tagged for the ARPA money because it's an eligible expense under ARPA, and it helps us to be able to meet the requirement for receiving the money. But if we have it in the general fund as we amend this budget, and we're being very tight and watching every dollar, if we have that money, we can, we don't have to use our ARPA money on the POCO and some of those other things. I've had the chambers cleaned. If some of you have been in the chambers,
I'm looking at it right now.
I think the chairs are green again. A deep cleaning. That technically we could pay for that out of the ARPA funds because it's COVID related. But again, if we have the money in the general fund, we can just, the board can make that decision and we can protect that ARPA account and not use those funds if that's the direction that you wish to go in.
I'll just say for myself, I think the more we can preserve the ARPA funding, the better. So if we've been fiscally responsible enough because you've been such a hawk, you've been challenging these department heads to stay in their budget, I think that if the funds are available within the general fund, we most certainly want to preserve the next 3 fiscal years where we're going to be talking about this ARPA money, of being able to spend it and how to best utilize it as we look forward to moving forward in the community. So I would say, please, at all costs, wherever it can be preserved, preserve it. But definitely, if it's something that staff needs or some of the department heads, some equipment that they might not have that they are in need of, I know the fire department had a list of some things that they wanted. I always know if you got $5 for Director West, he can tell you exactly what to do with it. So if we could get him some more money for his equipment to make sure we're out here, because I will give one shout out. There have been very few snow complaints that have been done in the past. So shout out to that new equipment, shout out to the team, and making sure that we are setting ourselves up for success. If there's any things that we need to purchase, such as maybe a stronger graffiti remover as we look forward to the summer coming up, but probably it'll take 2 to 3 months for it to even come in. I think if we have funding to do those things, that will be great. But for everywhere that we can preserve ARPA funding over the next 3 fiscal years, please, please. Trustee Jones, you unmuted it?
Yeah, if I could, I just want to chime in terms of the ARPA funding and just sharing my stance. I do agree with the mayor in terms of just the approach being very conservative. Like, let's really, look to, use this money down the line, when we really need it. I will say what I thought were the 2 things that we really needed in order to move forward with any decision. One was that feedback from the community. I know Ms. Satchel, I remember even on the committee, the idea was that we didn't have enough information, even with some of these moving parts with, the funding to really say what the community needs. And it's much greater than just our board and the department head. So my thoughts is I think POCO is going to be something that we really need to push. We really need to get the feedback from the community. And, lean on staff. One of the things that I remember that's been on the top of my mind was the IT issues that Manager Wells Armstrong brought up. And I'm of the mindset that that's something that needs to be done yesterday, because if that goes haywire, now something that was going to cost us $200,000 is $1 million project. Now we're talking about using ARPA for this entire, issue. And so I think things that are very high risk, we need to be trying to tackle those things immediately. And that's where I would hope to lean on staff to be able to give us that information. So that's something that when we have the resources, now is the time to pull the trigger, because, we're ultimately, it's going to be a cost saving, because this is going to cost us significantly more if, water hits these exposed, electrical lines, or if our data, is breached or whatever might happen. So those things I would encourage us to try to tackle immediately. And, for things that are a priority, but, we can push down a little bit to get more information from the community, I would just urge us to really have our non-for-profits, our stakeholders, the people that, have ideas about what this could be used for. Let's get as much information as we can so we can come with a sophisticated and well thought out recommendation to the board from the finance committee in terms of how we want to go about this and what the timeline are. And let's buy some time for some of these other opportunities to kind of come into fruition as well. So I just want to throw that out there in terms of the ARPA funding.
All right. Do any of the trustees have any other comments? All right, great. Well, just want to thank everybody again for being fiscally responsible during a pandemic time where there was a lot of call off time. We are struggling with finding qualified and quality candidates for various different roles. So people going above and beyond is extremely hard. We're on our second snowstorm, so I don't know what February and March or April are going to look like, but making sure that we have the resources that are needed for staff and making sure that we have the resources needed for the team. Even as we go back from limited services to full service at Village Hall, just whatever resources we need to purchase to ensure that the residents are safe, and making sure that the employees feel as though they're set up for success, making sure that we put those things within the budget as well. Because the pandemic, even though the numbers are back down and everybody's looking for some sort of normalcy or whatever that looks like in 2022, we still got to be vigilant. So I would say thank you so much for giving us this time and opportunity to review the budget, because without you guys, we're just looking at numbers. So thank you so very much, you guys. If there's no other questions or comments, I will go to Director Satcher.
Okay. So as I stated, this is the rough draft. This is my second presentation of it. So I'm thinking that I can tie everything out and just have it for the board board agenda. I think we're all here. I don't think I need to do a presentation. So it'll be ready for the board meeting. What is that? On, oh shoot.
The 15th.
On the 15th, right. Okay, thanks.
Well, Ms. Satchel?
Yes.
So I noticed this document wasn't attached in our backup. Is there a way we can either do that just for just the community's reference, or be able to point, or at least maybe say, hey, you can reference the document that'll be at this meeting for this information? Because we were going through it and we have it through our email, but I don't think if you went online, you'd be able to follow the amendments that you were just referencing.
Right. So when it's presented, right, I wouldn't want to present a draft to the residents. But when it's complete, then yeah, it'll be part of the board packet. So are you saying that you would want it to be out sooner than for the meeting?
No, I was just saying, so for instance, a resident, if they go to the village website to go to the agenda, it's only 2 pages. And the 40-page amendment file that you just presented, I guess I just thought maybe residents might want to reference what we're
right. Yeah, this
talking
is
about even.
Yeah, it's not ready for the public's review. I thought this was more of a workshop, and this is a working document. So yeah, it isn't prepared for, for everyone to look at it at this point. When it's complete, then, it'll be, ready to go out.
Okay.
All right, so we'll go to 8. Are there any public comments? None. All right. 9, no village manager report. 10, no village attorney report. 11, no omnibus agenda. 12, no new business. 13, no old business. 14, no board of trustees comments and information. 15, for information only. 16, no closed session. 17, I need a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Motion by trustee Plummer,
Second.
Reyes-Plummer, second by trustee Jones. Are there any questions? Please call the roll.
Trustee Sanchez,
Aye.
trustee Reyes-Plummer,
Aye.
trustee Jones,
Aye.
trustee Lightford, trustee Peppers,
Aye.
trustee Brandon, and Mayor Booker.
Mayor Booker is an aye with 3 minutes to spare before 7 p.m.
All right, 6:57 p.m. You are adjourned.
Everyone have a blessed night.